You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 99 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. In today's show, we're going to have a guest, Theo Long. He will be joining us to be discussing why Kevin Durant is the most hated player in the NBA, and is there a double standard when it comes to fans unleashing on Kevin Durant as opposed to every other player in the NBA. So we're going to get him on shortly. But to begin the show, I wanted to talk about what happened yesterday in the NBA. And unfortunately, no, I'm not talking about games, which is unfortunate because when the season schedule came out and you would have seen Celtics versus Raptors and then Pelicans versus Warriors, you would have thought, wow, that's a hell of a doubleheader for national games, right? Unfortunately, when these games rolled around, it was like, meh, not a whole lot there because the Pelicans have been a disappointment, as have the Celtics. And honestly, those two ball clubs have been known more for off the court than what they have been on the court this season. You've got, obviously, Anthony Davis, and trade rumors will not go away, quite honestly, until one of two things happen. And that's the Pelicans start winning ball games, or if they trade him. It's just that simple. He's too good to be sitting there in essentially the NBA wasteland. And the Celtics, a lot of talent there. I know they're not in as bad of a position as the Pelicans in terms of their playoff seedings. They're sitting at number 5, whereas the Pelicans are way down the conference in the West. But we're talking more about them for the problems within the locker room and problems within the chemistry. And I picked them to win the NBA title. And I stand by that pick. If somebody asked me now if I think that they would win it, I would have to say no, obviously, because hindsight, right? But that being said, I stand by all the logic that I had prior to the season. They were 10 minutes away, 12 minutes away, 1 quarter away, of going to the NBA Finals, and that was without Gordon Hayward. That was without Kyrie Irving. Now you fast forward and you're seeing a lot of tension. And you're seeing players yell at each other. You're seeing players almost get into fights with each other on the bench. Marcus Morris and Jaylen Brown, for example. And that leads me to what Kyrie Irving said after the game. And it was it was like, what the hell? Are you kidding me? What a surprising thing for him to say. And you know what? Instead of me repeating it, I'm going to actually play the clip because I want the full context to be applied here. I want the tone to be applied, and then I'll analyze it. So let's play that clip.
I've been there in the championship, I've tasted it, but I can't expect that they're going to get it right away either. So it was a big deal for me because I had to call Bron, and tell him, I apologize for being that young player that wanted to everything at his fingertips, and I wanted everything to be at my threshold. I wanted to be the guy that led us to the championship. I wanted to be the leader. I wanted to be all that, and the responsibility of being the best player in the world and leading a team is something that's not meant for many people. And Brown was one of those guys that came to Cleveland and tried to really show us what it's like to win a championship, and it was hard for him. And sometimes getting the most out of the group, it's not the easiest thing in the world. And like I said, only few are meant for it or chosen for it. And I feel like the best person to call was him because he's been in this situation. He's been there with me where I've been the young guy of, being a 22-year-old kid and, wanting everything. Wanting everything right now, coming off an all-star year starting, and then, this heck of a presence comes back, and now I got to adjust my game to this guy. And, you take it personal, but at the end of the day, he just wants what's best, and he has a legacy he wants to leave, and he has a window he wants to capture. So I think what that brought me back to was like, all right, how do I get the best out of this group of the success they had last year? And then helping them realize what it takes to win a championship.
My, oh my, oh my. Where do I even begin with this? Now, honestly, where do I begin with this? Look, this is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable. Let's begin with what he said where he was talking about how this team was close to winning the Eastern Conference last year without him. Okay, I would have thought at this point in Kyrie Irving's career that he would be a lot closer to what we saw from Kobe Bryant after Shaq had left. And Kobe Bryant was maturing into an outstanding leader. Because you remember when they got Pau Gasol had never won one single playoff game prior to playing with Kobe. He never won one playoff game. He'd been to the playoffs a few times. However, every time he had been to the playoffs, he was swept. And we saw great leadership out of Kobe Bryant in that time period. We didn't see him cause tension with Pau Gasol. He didn't want to be the man. He didn't want to put up points. He didn't want to prove anything. We have seen that from Kyrie Irving this year. Kyrie Irving, and you could hear from that clip, he thinks he's on LeBron's level. And that's incredible to me because he's not. I give LeBron a hell of a lot more criticism than most people. But at the same time, LeBron James is a 3-time NBA champion. He's a 4-time NBA MVP. He's a 3-time Finals MVP. I don't know how many All-NBA teams he's had. I don't know how many All-Star games. But you need a hell of a lot more than 2 hands to count them all. The point that I'm making is Kyrie Irving thinks he's on that level. He has not accomplished that. He has won one NBA championship alongside LeBron James, and I give him a lot of credit for that because it wasn't just LeBron who won that title, obviously. What I'm getting at here is, Kyrie Irving, it's like, what flavor of the day is it with this guy? Yes, he did force his way out, and a lot of the people have emailed me this, and this is why I'm actually inserting this into the opening part of the podcast. And they're saying, we've told you all along, Kyrie Irving screwed up in leaving the Cleveland Cavaliers and forcing that. That's what really screwed everything up between the Cavs, and that's why they're in the position they are. It's not because LeBron left. Well, honestly, LeBron, he had an opportunity to commit as well, and Kyrie Irving did want out, but if LeBron decided that he wanted to stay, they could have traded Kyrie Irving to bring in Paul George. And then you would have had Paul George alongside Kevin Love. They could have, also they could have packaged up the draft pick that they ended up getting with for trading Kyrie Irving before it became a lower lottery pick, and people thought there was an opportunity there for them to actually get Anthony Davis by using that pick as bait. There's other players that they could have gone after to try and give LeBron the help that he so apparently desperately needed in last year's playoffs. The point that I'm making is this is bullshit. This is absolute bullshit. I'm not butthurt or anything like that, but if people buy this, they're only buying it because it suits their agenda. They want to proclaim LeBron as being this great, selfless dude who's a great leader. And he said that, how difficult it is for him to lead a group of guys and to get the most out of them. Well, guess what? And this is the funniest part of all of this. This is what I knew I had to respond to this. Apparently, this phone call happened when LeBron James was out at dinner with Kevin Love. You cannot make this up. You cannot make this up. I mean, my God. The levels that they go to try to make this guy out to be a good guy, meaning LeBron, right? Now, it might be true. It might be true. I don't know if it is. But, my God, it's funny. But the thing that I wanted to point out is if LeBron makes people better, why is it that Kevin Love was the fall guy so badly in Cleveland that it gave him mental illness and anxiety? He couldn't even play, and I'm not joking around with that. That actually happened. And I can't remember what game it was, but he was at halftime. He was about to come out, and he turned around and he ended up having a panic attack. And But I thought that LeBron makes guys better around him. I mean, unbelievable. The same thing happened with Chris Bosh. He didn't have panic attacks, but he became the fall guy. And maybe Kyrie Irving wanted to talk about LeBron, how much maybe they missed Kevin Love being the fall guy so much. That's maybe where the frustration is. Because now in Boston, Kyrie Irving doesn't have that fall guy. Kyrie Irving is the fall guy. And typically throughout NBA history, the superstar is the fall guy, with the exception of LeBron James. When the Lakers didn't win, Kobe was the fall guy. When Chicago didn't win, Jordan was the fall guy. When the Lakers didn't win or Orlando didn't win, it was Shaq, prior to, of course, Kobe becoming the man. You go through the annals of NBA history. When it was Magic Johnson, it was Tragic Johnson. No one ever talked about, Michael Cooper or Byron Scott or even Kareem, really. It was Tragic Johnson that didn't live up to expectations in '84. Dr. J, he was the fall guy in Philly before they won a title. And you can go all the way back to Wilt Chamberlain. That's the typical response, because if that top guy is going to get all the credit, I mean, please don't make me play that clip where LeBron James calls himself the GOAT because he quotation marks, beat the 73-win Warrior team. If he's going to get all the credit, then damn it, he deserves a huge chunk of the blame. He never gets the blame. So that to me was interesting about... It was actually hilarious that it came out that he was sitting there having dinner with Kevin Love. Now, there's two things that you can really interpret out of all this. Number one is Kyrie Irving is not much different than LeBron James from a mentality standpoint. This was LeBron-esque. It truly was. He called out his teammates via the media, which is highly disturbing. And I was just on a podcast with a good friend, Ernest Christian, not that long ago. In fact, it was yesterday. And I said that Kyrie Irving is the guy that makes this team really... He makes them scary in the playoffs. No one in the East wants to face this team, and that includes Toronto. And that was proven yesterday by the fact that they came back. People aren't talking about that game yesterday, and myself included, so I'm guilty of this as well. But Toronto got off to a great start yesterday. It was Kyrie Irving leading the way. I remember he had a ridiculous left-hand floater in the first half. It was just insane. Those are the types of shots that scare the hell out of teams, because in the playoffs, there's nothing you can do about it. This is why Kobe was such a feared player in the NBA playoffs too. Forget the shooting percentage, to hell with that. When you lock in on a guy, can you still shut him down? And with Kobe, a lot of the time, you just have to tip your hat and shake his hand and say, congratulations, that was a hell of a shot. And the same happens with Kyrie Irving a lot of the time. But I'm starting to rethink this, whether they should stick with Kyrie Irving, because he's truly not the leader that we thought he was capable of being. How do you think his teammates are going to respond to that? I mean, re-listen to that clip, and it's all about pecking order. But let's be honest for a second. This team was playing a lot better, playoffs included, without Gordon Hayward and without Kyrie Irving last year. They beat Giannis in a 7-game series, and they ran right through Embiid and Ben Simmons in the second round, and they damn near beat LeBron and Kevin Love and the rest of the Cavs in the conference finals. By the way, that LeBron-led team with Kevin Love, they had swept the top-seeded Toronto Raptors. So they were rolling too. The point that I'm making is, if you're Jason Tatum, if you're Jaylen Brown, if you are Al Horford, oh my God, how do you think Al Horford thinks about this? Or if you're even someone like Terry Rozier. And Terry Rozier has been the ultimate teammate throughout all this. Played like an all-star in the NBA playoffs last year. And that is not an exaggeration. And yet when Kyrie Irving comes back, he knows that he's better than just being a backup point guard, yet he still accepts his role. Then he hears this, and this pecking order nonsense. Kyrie Irving has not done anything for this Celtics team, except made them worse. I hate to say that. I really hate to say that, because had he had come back and made them better, this team is an NBA championship contender, if not the top NBA championship contender for this season. And now you've got to start really questioning, if you're a Celtics in the front office, is this the guy that you want to build the team around? They had the same questions around Isaiah Thomas, and they ultimately said no to that, and they were able to trade to get Kyrie Irving. I am of the mindset right now that does this guy have the maturity to take a lesser role to allow the guys to give him help? The Al Horfords, the Browns, the Tatums, the Gordon Haywards, the Morrises. This team is loaded, but they're only as good as the opportunities they've given. And with Kyrie Irving being out, we saw how good they were last year. Keep in mind that Brown was a second-year player. Tatum was a rookie. Usually you expect players to progress because they are not as inexperienced, especially after a playoff run like that. They have declined. Why have they declined? You've got to really point the finger at Kyrie Irving. Now, the other thing that I got from this, and look, you probably laugh at this because I'm starting to smirk as I'm saying it, but I think Kyrie Irving's going to LA. I think Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard are also going to LA, but they're going to go to the Clippers. I think LeBron is going to need help, and I think Boston is not going to be thrilled by an early playoff loss, which is what they seem to be destined for at this stage. And they've got to really manage their contract situations to make sure that they don't lose any of their studs. As I said, the Tatums, the Browns, and maybe even the Terry Roziers. So what are they going to do? I think they'll offer Kyrie Irving a contract, but I don't think it will be the max. And I think Kyrie Irving is going to go. But that being said, if Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant are not going to New York, why would what makes New York such an appealing attraction for Kyrie Irving? I know that's where he grew up in New Jersey. He was actually born in Australia. I know that. So maybe that is appealing to him. But if he's becoming buddy-buddy with LeBron again and reminiscing about the good old days, maybe he's going back to LA. Maybe they can bring Kevin Love in too for more than just, a dinner date buddy for LeBron. The NBA never ceases to amaze. It really doesn't. But the mind games, the manipulation, and it's Cold War-esque. It's incredible what's going on here. And of course, we had another great game yesterday, which was the Warriors versus the Pelicans, but it doesn't even feel like much because the Pelicans are not a good team. They're a horrible team. So even though Steph Curry just exploded in the third quarter, put on a great shooting performance, if this was, the Pelicans, if they were the third seed in the West, I'd be all over this game. I'd be talking about how great it was. And yeah, the Warriors have won, 6 in a row now? And they dominated up against, they put up a shooting display in Denver, set the NBA record, I think it was, for the most points in the first quarter. Looked unbeatable. And that's a good Denver team. But outside the Denver game, they have not beat of this 6-game winning streak, and this includes, obviously, the Pelicans. There's not one team over 500 that they've beaten. So I'm still not buying that all is well. That being said, let's bring in Theo Long to talk not just about the Warriors, but more specifically, let's talk about Kevin Durant and his move to Golden State and why it's still being viewed as such a horrible decision. Because on one hand, as fans, we're meant to accept, if not celebrate, players' rights to move to whatever team they want to. We saw Shaq leave to LA from Orlando. We saw Grant Hill and T-Mac leave to go to Orlando. We saw LeBron take his talents to South Beach. And then return to Cleveland when the grass was greener. We also saw LaMarcus Aldridge go to San Antonio. Now, all those players, they were given some backlash, but after time it went away. If anything, in hindsight, most of those moves are now justified by the sports media and sports public. But with Durant, it's different. Is it because he went to form a super team? Because they sure as hell, they weren't a super team prior to him joining. And if that's the case, then why does LeBron get a pass? And if anyone should get grilled for this, quite honestly, it is LeBron. Because LeBron not only attempted forming a super team first in Miami and then in Cleveland, but he laid the groundwork. If what Kevin Durant did was so bad, he just followed the blueprint laid out to him and the rest of the league by LeBron. Now, to answer this question, I'd like to bring in a longtime correspondent and contributor to I Still Love This Game, Theo Long. And Theo, the first question I'd like to ask you is, if Durant somehow forced his way to playing with the Cavs instead of the Warriors in 2016, would the public still be so bitter towards this move?
I don't think they would be. I think there would still be some bitterness, from past players and past media people that covered like the those old eras of the 70s and the 60s and whatnot. But I don't think he would have gotten as much hate as he does now. I mean, number one, Cleveland wouldn't have been a 73 win team that just recently they would have recently won a title, but I just don't think he would have gotten the same level of hate he does now.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a good answer, because people would have not liked it, but they would have gotten over it too. For some reason, they haven't gotten over this Kevin Durant thing. And I get that he plays into it too, the burner accounts, and he talks a lot of smack to fans and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people do that. A lot of the great players, like Barkley, used to do this all the time as well. And we never held that against them. If anything, we look back adoringly and say, oh, Barkley was cool for saying this or doing that. But now it seems almost a contradiction, because if the fans boo Kawhi Leonard when he comes back, it's like, oh, the fans should show more gratitude. But with Kevin Durant, it's like free reign on him. I've got my own theory on it. I want to see what your theory is on it first, because I've got a suspicion it's probably similar to mine.
I don't know if it's similar, but I think it has a lot to do with the media. It seems to be like this need with the media to anoint someone better than Jordan. And for whatever reason, LeBron, is the chosen one. He's the chosen one. And, ever since, they've been talking about this, LeBron Jordan thing, going back to, 07, 08? There seems to be this need with, a lot of the media members, like, of course, Shannon Sharp, Nick Wright, or whatnot. But there seems to be a need to, push LeBron, to the greatest ever status. And, I hate I would say this to LeBron in his face: you're not better than Jordan. So, but
I'm glad you would say that, because I think a lot of people have become afraid to even say anything negative, or what can be perceived as being negative, which is a whole can of worms, because you might be saying something like, for example, I've said stuff like, I compared him to Magic Johnson. And to a lot of fans, just the mere comparison to anybody apart from Jordan is considered hatred. So to me, Magic's one of the greatest players that's ever played, without question. Without question, he's a top 4 player. He's an instant lock to my Mount Rushmore. So me comparing him is a great honor, in my opinion. It's a great form of respect.
Absolutely, I agree.
But to a lot of people, they will interpret that as being pure hatred. I agree with you 100% that the media wants to anoint LeBron, and the reason you can really tell that is how skewed the debates are now. They don't have people on that will kick back, that will push back. They'll have people on that say, oh, I think Jordan's better. But when they go on these long-winded, ramblings about why LeBron's better, no one will say, hold on a second, this isn't exactly right. They'll talk about how successful he was in getting to the NBA Finals. They won't talk about how he wet the bed in 2007. That was a winnable series for them, believe it or not.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. Literally all those games came down to the wire.
Mm-hmm. And he played terribly. He played absolutely terribly in those games. He shot the ball really bad. And for a guy who was meant to be a versatile defender at that point, why was he guarding Bruce Bowen? Why wasn't he on Manu Ginobili? Why wasn't he on Tony Parker, the guys that were actually killing the Cavs down the stretch of those ball games? To me, I think you nailed it, but I'll go a little bit further with this is they wanted to anoint LeBron, but and maybe if Durant doesn't go to Golden State, LeBron does get a three-peat in Cleveland. Who knows? Because I don't think that Golden State team without Durant has the offensive versatility to really win back-to-back titles. You know, we saw them win one in 2015. It was transcendent in the sense that we have never seen a pure jump shooting team win the NBA title before. We had seen teams that had players that could make jump shots. Obviously, Larry Bird could make jump shots. Ray Allen could make jump shots. But that wasn't their only player. I mean, you'd think back to the 86 Celtics, your favorite team of all time. And they pounded you with intelligence, and they hit you on the boards on both ends of the offensive and defensive, and just such an intelligent passing team. Think about the continuity between Larry Bird and Bill Walton, for example. Sure, they had some shooting as well, but that's the best example you can sort of bring up until you get to 2015. In 2015, we saw the shift. The shooting became more important. But hey, let's apply proper context here. First round, Drew Holiday was injured. Second round, Mike Conley was injured. Third round, Patrick Beverley was injured. And in the championship series, Kyrie Irving was injured. Also, Kevin Love was injured too. So what actually happened there was you saw guys like Steph Curry look like they're dominating, but they're dominating against backup players or older veterans who can't stay in front of their guy. Now, 2016 happens, they blow the league right out of the water. 73 wins, looked unstoppable. But the flip side is they still lost a lot of games by huge margins. They did not look unbeatable. And people didn't take that record seriously. I'll give you an example as to why they didn't take that seriously. Is on the very last day of the regular season, you had Kobe Bryant go for 62 points in a meaningless game, albeit his last game. But it was in terms of the playoff structure, there's no meaning to it. Far more people paid attention to that than the Warriors breaking that 72 win record. Because no one really cared about it. They didn't take them seriously as an all-time great team. And, they were down 3-1 to Oklahoma. Then they were up 3-1 to the Cavs. And they showed exactly how susceptible they were to teams that could exploit them. So I don't think that was a great team. And then the Cavs already had their number at that point. I mean, they just owned them the last 3 games. Had they met in the next 2 finals without Durant, at least the Cavs are winning another title. At least. So by Kevin Durant going there, and I'll let you jump in a second, but by Kevin Durant going to Golden State, he essentially put a roadblock up for LeBron's path to greatness. So now they've tried to re-engineer this whole what makes a great player argument to winning is no longer important. And I think that's why the backlash towards Durant is so high, especially in the media, and people follow it. It's because they see Durant as the guy that actually prevented LeBron from having a legitimate argument for being the greatest of all time.
Excellent points. All the points were excellent, especially, when you talked about, the 15 Warriors and just, obviously they were a really good team, but, I mean, you can't ignore the fact that, all these players were hurt. I mean, these are like all-star caliber players, with the exception of Beverly, but, I mean, these were like all-star players that were out. And, like you said, literally Steph and Clay just, walked all over those teams. But yeah, I absolutely agree. If the Warriors needed KD, they needed KD to win again. They weren't going to beat Cleveland, without KD. I mean, that's just fact. That's just a fact. And yeah, and KD joining the Warriors put up the ultimate roadblock for LeBron, and now the media is trying to use all these new age stats, analytics to try to justify, this is why LeBron's the greatest. Look at all these stats. I mean, it's stats, and stats are often meaningless, misleading, and most of them are useless.
Yes. I'm glad you used that last one. They are absolutely useless. The most important one is wins and losses. The final stat
wins and losses.
Did you score more points than your opposition? That's the most important stat. It gets forgotten so much in today's discussions when it comes to basketball. I don't know if it's a 2K thing or if it's a generational thing or they just tried to, when I say they, I'm referring to obviously sports journalism, they tried to re-engineer what makes a basketball player great. And I think that's why people ask why LeBron is hated. Look, he's not hated, okay? I don't know about you, but I've got him in my top 10 of all time. You may have him higher. But if I've got someone in my top 10 of all time, that's not me hating him. If I said he's not a top 50 player of all time, that's hating, because he clearly is. But if I'm able to see his flaws and see his weaknesses objectively, just because they may be subjective to it and demand everybody else to, doesn't mean that I'm hating because I'm simply pointing out that, hey, he you can, when it's all said and done, I think I would probably be able to make an argument for Kevin Durant being better than LeBron James when their careers are all done. Because Kevin Durant, to me, like, I didn't, for what it's worth, I hated the move to Golden State as well. I like seeing competitive basketball, and I didn't like it at all. But you can't tell me, and I'm not saying you are saying this, but other people say that there's a difference between what LeBron did to Miami and back to Cleveland, of course, than what Kevin Durant did. Kevin Durant was just more successful in it. I'm not going to quote-unquote hate on the guy, to use their own words, because he was more successful in it. If anything, power to you. You did it right. You did it correct. You've been dominant, far more dominant than what those Miami Heat teams were.
And the difference is Durant went to Golden State. He actually became a more well-rounded player, especially defensively. I don't know if anybody's paying attention. KD has basically played elite-level defense the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, since he's been in Golden State. I thought he should have got Defensive Player of the Year his first year there. That's how good he was defensively.
Oh, I agree with you. He was protecting the rim. He guards the ball handlers. And when they go small, when they bring in Iggy, so they go small with Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, Iguodala, Thompson, and Curry. Obviously, Iguodala has slowed down. So Iguodala is not the primary on-the-ball defender on the elite scoring perimeter player. It's Durant now. Plus, he's able to come over and help. He's a much better shot blocker because of his longer arms than what Draymond Green is. Draymond Green might be a smarter defender. He can recognize plays and be able to react a little bit quicker. But when it comes to just protecting that front of the rim, man, Kevin Durant's a hell of a defender.
And there's a willingness to defend. Like, you know, I look at Game 2 of the finals last year. You know, this year. KD, Game 2, KD from the start, he took LeBron. He said, you know what, I'm going to take you. I'm going to pick you up full court. I'm going to defend you. If you score, you're going to score on me. And that's something that we don't really see from LeBron anymore.
Did we ever see it?
We saw it.
I know people bring up Derrick Rose, but I mean, let's be honest here. Derrick Rose, his next best scorer was Luol Deng. So all of the Miami Heat players were, they knew you control Derrick Rose, you've got this series, and that's why it was such a short series. But outside of Derrick Rose, I mean, look, okay, if we give them Derrick Rose, what happened the very next series? And I'm not even talking about Jason Terry and JJ Barrera, as hilarious as that is.
I mean,
but
he got dominated by role players.
Yeah, I know, but if he's so willing, if he had the Kevin Durant attitude, he could have done at least a better job in slowing down Dirk Nowitzki in those fourth quarters and what Chris Bosh. He should have recognized that. He doesn't do that now, man. He doesn't even defend his own player now, let alone defend the best player.
Like, I mean, look at Marcus Morris, like in the conference finals.
Yeah.
I mean, like, dude, like the guy was like, wow, LeBron's like 10 feet away from him, and like, come on.
The best example I could bring up of this, and it's always comical. I encourage anybody who didn't see this series to at least check it out because it was funny. It was against the Pacers. I think it might have been Game 3, and so LeBron, being this versatile defender that he was guarding Bob Donovich. I can't pronounce his name, man. He's plays a 3, sometimes plays a 4. He's a good shooter, but just a good shooter, not a great shooter. When you think of the Pacers, you think of Oladipo and other players, right? And so, of course, LeBron not guarding Oladipo, kind of trying to hide on defense on Bogdanovic. And the game was sort of close. And in the third quarter, Bogdanovic just started hitting three after three after three. And LeBron's all, 2 or 3 feet back. Late contests, of course. What did Mark Jackson used to call that? Fake hustle? That was the epitome of it. And then after, like, maybe the third or fourth three that he hit in that quarter, we saw a switch and LeBron was guarding the center. I was like, oh man, you can't even hide him. And there's a reason that his teams are so bad defensively now. He essentially plays like a free safety. And it's 4-on-5 with a zone and him roaming around trying to get steals and cheat.
He's a horrible free safety.
Yeah, he's a horrible one too. Who was that safety? Oh no, he was a cornerback for the Giants, Jason Sehorn, that everyone went after. He reminds me of that. Everyone just went after. People go after LeBron now, and
he was horrible.
He was horrible, and we could talk about why he was in the league another time. I'm pretty sure we'll probably agree on that as well. But the end of the day is, I think this has exposed just how weak LeBron's claim to the greatest of all time truly is. Because when you look at every other player, even guys like Kobe, and Kobe has said this, he said he had to figure out how to beat Boston. He didn't run to San Antonio to beat Boston. He didn't leave LA to try and beat Boston. He tried to figure out how to beat the Celtics with the team that he had in LA. And he ended up doing that barely. I mean, that was a great series game, 2010. But the fact remains, when LeBron is put up against the wall, he doesn't try to figure it out. He tries to look for the easy way out. And I think
he's a runner.
He absolutely is. And I've said it many times on the podcast, and it's probably why I get so many abusive messages.
You're not the only one.
You're not the only one. Well, welcome to the club, man. But I think he's an opportunist. And I don't think he has elevated the game one bit. He has elevated his own standing. But I think when people look back at him historically, they'll be thinking, really, you guys thought he was the best? It's hard to even make the argument now that he's the best player in the league now. You can say in 2012, 2013, he was, without question, the best player in the league. But Kevin Durant wasn't that far off him either. I mean, people almost would like to revise history and make out like there was LeBron at number one, Daylight second, and maybe Kevin Durant third. Kevin Durant was always close to him.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I think people forget how amazing Kevin Durant was. In his OKC days. I mean, he was basically a top 5 player about his third or fourth year.
Maybe even prior to that. The first year they made the playoffs, they gave the Lakers all they could handle in the first round. I think the Lakers were the number 1 seed. This might have been 2010, actually. I
believe it was, yes.
Yeah, the Lakers were the number 1 seed, and they won the first 2 games. And then the next 2 games, Oklahoma drilled them. Games 3 and 4. And Kevin Durant was the leader of that team, and it's disappointing the way it all ended up for him. But there's something you mentioned earlier that I wanted to get back in touch on. And I did an entire episode on this as well. It was... And I'm really glad that you think this way too, is people seem to think that Golden State saved Kevin Durant's career. And let's not pretend it hasn't been mutually beneficial for the two of them, for both parties. Kevin Durant has won back-to-back titles. But if we're weighing it up, based off the question marks that I raised early for the 2015 finals and their championship, and the way they imploded in the 2016 playoffs, not just in the finals, but also against Oklahoma, which had Durant, ironically. Kevin Durant saved their legacy a hell of a lot more than the Warriors saved his.
I would agree. I absolutely agree. Kevin Durant, let's say he never goes to Golden State. We're still talking about, one of the 2-3 greatest small forwards ever, probably a top 10 player all time. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Would he have won a championship in OKC? No, probably not. At least not with Russell Westbrook. But that's another point. But yeah, this guy was already a certified Hall of Famer. He was going to be one of the greatest, top 15 players ever. Golden State would not be sitting where they are. They would have had that one title, and that's it. And so I think it's an interesting point, where would Golden State be, right now, if KD had never joined them? They may be making some moves with their roster.
Oh, yeah. Klay Thompson wouldn't be there, I don't think. I think they would have traded him for a big. And because it's all well and good for Klay Thompson to accept a lesser role when they're winning, but would he have accepted the lesser role had they not, if, continued second-round losses and, Draymond Green getting more field goal attempts in playoff games than him? I don't think he would be cool with that. And rightly so, because he's one of the great shooters of all time. So I think they would have had to find a way to get him out of there. Maybe we would have seen Boogie Cousins get traded for him a lot earlier. But so you said that maybe Durant would have been a top 3 or 4 small forward of all time. Out of curiosity, what is your... I know you've highly regarding Larry Bird. You've got LeBron in there, obviously. What is your top 5 small forward list?
Wow, my top 5 small forwards would be Bird number 1, LeBron 2, Dr. J 3, and right now I just recently slid KD to 4th, just right in front of Elgin Baylor. Oh,
wow, cool. At least Elgin Baylor gets some love. A lot of people forget about him. Him and Elvin Hayes and Bob Pettit, people forget about those greats from the 60s, man. That being said, I don't have him in my top 5. He's in number 6 for me. Isn't that funny?
Hey, at least he's in there somewhere.
Yeah, he's in there somewhere. But man, he ran up against a roadblock so many times in the finals. People talk about Golden State being a dominant team because they could potentially have 4 Hall of Famers on their team. I'm not sure if you would put... Look, Draymond Green will get into the Hall of Fame just off his resume alone, but he's one of those guys where I don't care what you tell me. If he's in a different situation, he's not an All-Star, he's not an Olympian, he's definitely not an NBA champion. So that's the situation making that guy. So I think they have 3 future legitimate Hall of Famers in Thompson, Curry, and Durant. But the point I was going to make is if a team's got 3 future Hall of Famers, just think about what Jerry West and Elgin Baylor had to go up against, or what Wilt Chamberlain had to go up against. They had Hall of Famers, filling up water bottles, man.
I want to say at one point, man, those Celtics teams, they had about maybe 5.
They had 8. Possibly. They had 8 at one point.
6 at one time, right?
No, they had
Something
8.
Like
they had 8. The guys that I can't even remember all their names. They had both Joneses, so Sam and Casey Jones. They had Tommy Heinsohn, Don Nelson, Bill Russell. Who's that little point guard? Bob Cousy. So that's...
Because I want to say... At one point, they had Cousy, Sam Jones, and Havlicek.
This is all on one team. And Snatch Sanders, that's the guy I was forgetting about, Tom Snatch Sanders. So and of course, let's not forget their coach as well, who was the genius behind it all. So it's not like they had a bad coach. Like, my goodness. So people think that this Warriors team is unbeatable. And that's what I've always said to people who discount Wilt. They will say that LeBron's title in 2016 should be worth 2 titles.
No.
But here's the ultimate counter that I've yet to receive a response from, apart from being blocked. Which is really funny, by the way. They come onto my page to block me because they can't handle a conversation. But that's neither here nor there. But the counter that I have to that, if LeBron's title in 2016 is worth so much, if it's worth 2 titles, and I think Wilt's title, when he finally broke that dynasty and destroyed the Celtics in, 5 games? When he was in Philly, that should be worth
67, right?
Yes, it was 67. That should be worth about 20 championships, in my opinion. Maybe a slight exaggeration, but if we're going to start playing this game of certain titles mean more than others, then that one means a hell of a lot more. And the same goes for Jordan, by the way, in '98. The fact that they won in '98, then that deserves a lot more too. People forget about that one.
And I'm glad you brought up 98 because, my greatest argument for Jordan as the GOAT actually comes from his performance that entire season. Mm-hmm. I mean, dead legs, injuries. People forget Pippen was out, more than half the year. Rodman had got benched in favor of Tony Kukoc. So that title, I mean, that was largely on Jordan dragging the Bulls, a Bulls team on fumes, past a really good Pacer team, and past a quietly great Utah team. Because I thought that Utah team in '98 was great.
Think about the teams Utah beat. That feels like a championship team when you look at them. When they had a reunion, and that's when it hit me. It's like a reunion of a championship team. In '98, they beat, albeit they were old, but they still beat Drexler, Barkley, and Olajuwon in the first round. Then they took out Robinson and a rookie Tim Duncan, who was all NBA first team, by the way. He wasn't just a rookie. He was all NBA first team, Tim Duncan. They beat them 4-1. Then they swept Shaq and a young Kobe, but they also had an all-star backcourt not beyond Kobe in Eddie Jones and Nick Van Exel. They swept them.
That Lakers team was loaded.
Unbelievably loaded. Bad coach. I'll give him that. It was a very incompetent coach. But they just... That Utah team swept them. They made them look like... You know when you see a very finely tuned college team, think Duke or Kansas or one of those teams, that they know exactly where they're going. It was like they were playing a bunch of street ballers who just didn't know what they were doing. They were just playing individually. That's how mediocre they made that Laker team look. They're different levels. It was incredible. And I'll mention something about Jordan's Game 6 in '98. Everyone talks about that, right? And everyone talks about LeBron's block on Iguodala. And Chauncey Billups, I believe, said, look, you can call yourself the greatest, or I can see why you would call yourself the greatest, if you had made that shot that Kyrie Irving made. Well, let's replay what happened in Game 6 of the '98 Finals. Karl Malone, who had been unstoppable in Game 5 and Game 6, Jordan literally comes and takes the ball out of his hands. One of the great defensive plays of all time. Right up there with LeBron's block, in my opinion. If not better, because Karl Malone's a hell of a better player than what Iguodala is. He takes the ball down and then he makes the shot. There's something Kyrie Irving did. People don't talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, too, I mean, that fourth quarter of that game, I mean, Jordan, it seemed like he made every single shot.
Well, who else did they have? They had Pippen. Pippen wasn't doing anything. He was injured. And to his credit, he was still playing. They had Tony Kukoc, who was a good scorer. But, I mean, my God, if Tony Kukoc is your second best player at that point, and you're still able to win in Utah, up against Karl Malone and John Stockton and Byron Russell and those guys, the same team that, as I said, just decimated a loaded Western Conference. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible that we'll see someone better than Jordan, but I think NBA fans and the NBA marketing need to maybe come to terms with it's going to be a while, if ever. And he may just be a Babe Ruth, where no one surpasses him.
I don't see anyone surpassing him. It's going to take perfection to pass him.
Mm-hmm.
But
or close to it.
Close to it. I mean, you have to show up every single game, which, I mean, pretty much Jordan did. He, even in the games he stunk. I mean, there was a game in Miami where he was like, I think 2 for 20 or something.
Oh,
but then he ended up.
Game. I remember that.
Yeah, that was against my Heat team. I was a Heat fan, and then all of a sudden Jordan ends up with 40 something, and he got hot.
Yeah,
game.
That was the. What was it? I want to say it was Game 4. I think it was Game 4 because the Bulls already had a 3-0 lead. They were out partying the night before the game. and you're right, he was one of the worst shooting performances of all time in the first 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, he just got pissed off and started making everything. He was a bad man. Theo, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about prior in relation to this topic?
I just think a lot of young fans, they need to actually do some research instead of relying on the media, like Fox Sports, ESPN, to tell them, what's what, and, who's great and, who's not. Because I think there's a lot of basketball ignorance.
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I would I've said this a few times on the podcast. I think the basketball fans and the way that they market themselves, the NBA, is going through an identity crisis. They've got two major demographics. They've got casual fans and they've got hardcore fans. And I think they cater way too hard to the casual fans. We don't see super in-depth basketball discussions. Like, compare this to the NFL. When you watch NFL on ESPN or whatever, see, I'm still learning about American football, right? But it's not dumbed down. It's not Fisher-Price analysis. You have ex-players, ex-coaches talking about zone blocking schemes on TV. And really, the intricacies is incredible. With basketball, you don't get that. When you watch The Jump or whatever other shows are out there, they talk about shoes. They talk about Instagram posts. They talk about ridiculous things. And it's just like, my God.
Gossip show.
Excuse me?
It's a gossip show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's no better than a gossip show. And it's insulting because the game is so good. The game is, it's not all about, it's not it's not, as I referred to the 98 Lakers, it's not pick-up basketball. It's not street ball basketball. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it. And the media itself, the NBA media, and the marketing does not celebrate those aspects of it. They look for absolutes which aren't absolute. And it's kind of disappointing to me that they've gone in that direction. That's probably the reason this podcast has been so successful, because I'll actually go in that direction. But it's disappointing because it's a hell of a game and it's a very complicated game. And it's a very intelligent game. You can't look at the players like Larry Bird to Bill Russell to Michael Jordan to Magic Johnson, all these intelligent players. Sure, they may have had gifts beyond that, like Larry Bird's ability to shoot, Magic's ability to pass, Jordan's athleticism. But the one undeniable trait between all those great players was their intelligence. And that needs to be celebrated a hell of a lot more for the game to be taken seriously.
I agree, absolutely.
Theo, thanks for being on the show, man. I want you back on soon.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course, man. If people don't know who Theo is, I said he was a contributor to I Still Love This Game. And when I was first starting I Still Love This Game as its own separate brand, he was a guy that put his hand up and he actually helped out with the greatest first round series of all time, wrote a lot of great content there. He also did some contributed in the one-on-one tournament that we had back in the day as well. So Theo, thank you on a personal level. Thank you for building the brand. You've been integral with that, and I want to get you on soon. Let's look to get you on in about a month's time, because then we'll have some fresh topics to talk about beyond LeBron James. Maybe we can talk about but it'll be interesting. One last question before you go. Considering we're talking about Kevin Durant, where do you think he'll end up?
The sky's the limit for KD.
No, excuse me. Sorry, I mean in free agency. Sorry.
Who knows? I can't see him going to LA with LeBron. But I don't think he's going to stay at Golden State either. So, I mean, who knows? Obviously, people probably want to go to like a winning situation. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow, let's say, ends up at Boston.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
A place I actually thought he, should have went in 16, which would have been a perfect situation for him. But
Kyrie wasn't there though, was he? Now you got Kyrie Irving as well. Man, that'd be good. I think as much as I'd love to see him in Boston, I think he's probably a bigger chance to go to the Clippers, especially if they can somehow bring out Kawhi Leonard. And just as an FU to LeBron, I could see him doing that, because I think he's starting to really resent the fact that he is hated for doing the same thing that LeBron did and LeBron is celebrated for. So what better way to take it out on somebody than to not just usurp him in championships, but take the city that he has adopted himself. It'll be interesting. I don't think he's going to stay in Golden State either. I think that's why everyone made a big deal out of that the Draymond Green situation with him. And I think people was like, wow, this is going to happen again. But Let's fingers
That
crossed for
would be
Boston.
the ultimate.
Fingers crossed for Boston, huh? That would be fun.
I actually like your Clippers idea. That I think that would be the ultimate FU to LeBron, and those in the media that love LeBron. Nick Wright, of course, but that would be the ultimate FU. I want to see that. I want to see that happen.
Let's make it happen, man. Let's start campaigning for it, because they wouldn't be able to ignore it then. That's the thing. Like, if he goes to Boston, they'll say, "Oh, he just latched onto another super team or whatever." Isn't it funny? Every team he goes to is a super team. But if he goes to the Clippers, I mean, who have they got? They've got a hell of a coach. They got Harris, who would probably, I'm not sure if they could keep him in as well as bringing in both Durant and Kawhi Leonard. I'm not too sure how the salary cap works in terms of that. But if they got both of those guys, and you got Patrick Beverley, you got Avery Bradley as a defensive backcourt. Whew. Oh my goodness.
This might be Doc Rivers' best coaching job.
I would agree with that 100%. I thought last year was, and he's even superseded that. Last year he had nobody. They got rid of Chris Paul, they got rid of Blake Griffin early. They had all those injuries, and they very nearly made the playoffs as well. He's people talk about him being overrated. On the contrary, man, I think he's incredibly underrated.
No, I've never thought Doc was overrated. I mean, Doc deserves all the praise he gets. I mean, look at the job he did in Orlando with T-Mac, and
even
God, they had nobody.
Even prior to that, once they traded Penny Hardaway, and before they brought in T-Mac, their best two players were John Amici, of all people, and Darrell Armstrong, and they very nearly made the playoffs then too. I mean, and he got coach of the year. Yeah, Darrell Armstrong.
Wow.
The guy that used to drink about 15 cups of coffee before a game so he wouldn't lose energy, and then he'd fall asleep in press conferences because he'd just crash out. But what a hard worker, right? Anyway, Theo, thanks once again for coming on the show. As I said, we'll be in touch with you soon. We'll get you back on the show. It's been a pleasure. Did you have any final thoughts?
Can't wait to come back on, man. I'm always free for you, so I'll see you next month.
Absolutely, bro.
You'll hear me next month.
Absolutely, man. Take care, guys, and thanks for listening.